Greetings. I want to introduce myself, Dr. Darrell W. Cummings, and I'm blessed to be the pastor of Bethlehem Apostolic Temple in Wheeling, West Virginia, and Shiloh Apostolic Faith Assembly in Weirton, West Virginia. Let me first convey my thanks to the Martin Luther King Committee for allowing me to be a part of this virtual celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I also would like to thank 4th Street United Methodist Church and their pastor for providing a studio for us to meet. I've been told that there are basically 3 types of people in the world. People who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who say, "What just happened?" Based on you watching this virtual service, I'd like to believe you to be the people who want to make things happen. We know that is true about Dr. Martin Luther King. You have to decide, are you going to make your future happen, or are you just going to accept what future happens? Dr. John Maxwell says, if you just accept life, then you're not creating your future, you're just enduring it. I believe if you're watching this virtual broadcast, you are a person who is intentional. I believe you know you have choices. I believe you can be one of the people who make a difference in this world. Make sure you decide you will not be a victim of life, but you will be a victor of life. Don't wait for good things to happen. Make good things happen. Christopher Columbus kept toll records of the distance traveled on his first voyage to the New World on the Santa Maria. One was true, he thought, but he deliberately faked the other. Ironically, the fake log turned out to be the more accurate of the two. To alleviate his crew's fears that they were getting too far from home on an unknown sea, Columbus gave them a reduced mileage estimate. When, for example, he told them on September 11th, 1492, that they had covered 16 leagues, he actually recorded 20 leagues in his secret log. And though he didn't know it, Columbus' true distance records were overestimated by 9% on the average. His fake distances came out closer to the actual distance traveled. The problem lay in the inaccuracy of the 15th century navigation tools. No one at the time could measure east-west distances accurately at sea, partially because of the timepieces of that day, sandglasses. You see, they were affected by the motions of the sea and the waves. Speed really had to be guessed at, usually by watching things float by. And Columbus, like most navigators of his day, was forced to use what they called dead reckoning, which involves laying out a compass course and estimating the distance traveled on a chart. He happened to be very good at it, but there was much room for error. When the crew found out about his deceptions, they threatened mutiny. But before they did, they found land. A new world appeared. I'm concerned that there are a number of people who have two logs for their ship of life. A log that has no prejudice, no discrimination, no mistreatment of others who are different than them, and the true log, which is buried in deception of themselves and others. This week we will celebrate the birthday and the holiday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was born on Tuesday, January 15, 1929, at the family home in Atlanta, Georgia. It became his mission to make us look at the real log of life with all its imperfections in life. And I regret that no one has to convince me personally that prejudice is alive and well. I can still remember going to school that had approximately 3,000 students and less than 100 blacks. And I was blessed to run for student council president. I still remember being called in by the principal and being asked, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news first? Well, because I thought it was about the election, I asked for the good news first. The principal looked at me with a smile and said, the good news is that you won the election for student council president. The bad news is I can't have a black president in a white school. I was shocked, even though the students who voted for me had to know what color I was when they voted for me. Their vote was being nullified because the authority of that day said they knew better. Principal went on to say he would destroy the ballots and that only he and I would know the real truth, and that he would deny that this conversation ever took place. But he thought I should know I won. Even though that took place now 40 years ago, I still remember the pain of that moment. On my ship log of life, I know what it is to have someone call you the N-word while you're preaching a service. On my ship log of life, I know what it is for someone to change your church sign from morning worship to in worship. On my ship log of life, I know what it is for someone to put a sign on your door saying that they're representing the KKK and I better move or see my property burned down. And I know what it is to see it burned down. The good news is that the overwhelming majority of people are better than good. But as someone said, one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. No wonder Dr. King once said, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. On the other occasion, he said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And once he even said, never succumb to the temptation of bitterness. Also, let no man pull you so low as to hate him. So he concluded by saying, I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden for anyone to bear. Perseverance is important in the spiritual realm, but it is also important in all other spheres of life as well. It's been said that 99% of all success the people of this world have enjoyed is due to persistence and perseverance. Genius has been described as 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. However, we don't generally like to think like that. People claim that Demosthenes, and I apologize if I pronounce his name incorrectly, achieved greatness by natural abilities, which came easily to him. For those of you who remember your history, he was the Greek statesman and the orator of ancient Athens. He was also Alexander the Great's father. He started life as a terribly handicapped stammerer and stutterer. In fact, it cost his entire inheritance because he was unable in the public forum to stand up and defend what was his own. So it was given to someone else. Demosthenes went to the beach and placed pebbles in his mouth to force himself to enunciate more clearly. Over the roar of the waves, he began to practice day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. He practiced until his name became synonymous with excellence. However, it was 99% sweat, persistence, and perseverance that did it. It was very easy on our part to say, oh, doesn't he sound wonderful? He was marvelously gifted. I am sure that if I were gifted in the similar way, I too would be great. This is used as a cop-out to avoid the long, arduous task of persistent study, practice, and preparation. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was willing to take that arduous task. Here are some of the things he said concerning it. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. Change does not roll in on wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward. We may have all come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. Let me close by using a few more words of Dr. Martin Luther King. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor polite, nor popular, but he must take it because his conscience tells him it's the right thing to do. And I do not know all the ins and outs of what's going on in our society. I just know that in my estimation, together, we can make a difference. Join the team of making a difference in our world. I know that's the team I want to be on. God bless you, and thank you for your time.
As a newcomer to Wheeling, to West Virginia, and to Appalachia, but as a Philadelphia boy who grew up paying attention to Martin Luther King's words and legacies, the story of local voices raised up appeals to my sense of local pride oriented toward national challenges. Hi, my name is Richard McCouch, and I'm the director of the Appalachian Institute at Wheeling University. Growing up with a child's eyes and ears, Dr. King's message came home to me in the person of Mr. Joseph Leedy, the father of my classmate, Teresa, a lector at our church, and a customer on my paper route. The Leedys were the only African-American family in our parish and our school. Mr. Leedy read scripture with a resonance, keeping my attention. At the time of Dr. King's assassination in 1968, Our nation was reeling with sharps up and downs, not unlike this year. So as an 11-year-old, I did not know what to think or how to think about these things, but Mr. Leedy lived Dr. King's message for me. In the year that I was born, Dr. King published an essay that Mr. Leedy witnessed in his life and family, and from which I learned. Dr. King wrote, "The method of nonviolence is based on the conviction that the universe is on the side of justice. It is in this deep faith in the future that causes the nonviolent resistor to accept suffering without retaliation. He knows that in his struggle for justice, he has cosmic companionship. This belief that God is on the side of truth and justice comes down to us from the very long tradition of our Christian faith. There is something at the very center of our faith that reminds us that Good Friday may reign for a day, but ultimately it must give way to the triumphant beat of Easter drums. Evil may so shape events that Caesar may occupy a palace and Christ a cross. But one day, that same Christ will rise up and split history into AD and BC, so that even the life of Caesar must be dated by his name. You and I here are dated by Christ's name, as is Martin Luther King Jr. and all who learned from his message. I salute the local voices of Appalachia raised for justice with a deep faith in the future. And this one is for you, Mr. Leedy.
From Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s sermon, Loving Your Enemies. A second thing that an individual must do in seeking to love his enemy is to discover the element of good in his enemy. And every time you begin to hate that person and think of hating that person, realize that there is some good there and look at those good points which will overbalance the bad points. So somehow the isness of our present nature is out of harmony with the eternal oughtness that forever confronts us. And this simply means this, that within the best of us there is some evil, and within the worst of us there is some good. Now there is a final reason I think that Jesus says, love your enemies. It is this, that love has within it a redemptive power. And there is a power there that eventually transforms individuals. That's why Jesus says, love your enemies. Because if you hate your enemies, you have no way to redeem and to transform your enemies. But if you love your enemies, you will discover that at the very root of love is the power of redemption. The theme for this Martin Luther King celebration is attributed to his quote called, "We may have all come on different ships, but we are in the same boat now." It is hard to be on the same boat when we hate our enemies. During the past few months, when we began the campaign here in the United States, I began praying for God to give us the grace to recognize the goodness in each other, especially the goodness among those we disagree with. And it is a blessing that when I was reflecting on the different quotes by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I discovered this message. So I invite all of us to continue our journey in this same boat, to be able to have that grace, God's grace, to be able to recognize the goodness in each other so that we can continue to love our enemies or anyone who disagree with us.
To me, celebrating Martin Luther King means celebrating willfulness, power, and strength. It means celebrating a man who refused to give up, regardless of any obstacles or criticisms he faced along the way. He has inspired and continues to inspire millions of people across the world and newer generations. His tenacity taught us to fight for whatever it is that we feel strongly about, even when the odds are against us or even if we may stand alone. Martin Luther King showed us that we can achieve anything with persistence and dedication.
Hi, my name is Anaya Bonds, and I'm a student at Wheeling University. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is so important to me because of the impact he had on the African American community. Having a day in honoring of him is a way to not only show our appreciation to him, but to also make sure that everything he did for us will never go unnoticed. I feel like if we have his day and to honor him, then future generations to come will always know what he did for us, and nothing he did will ever go in vain. So I'm very grateful that we have Martin Luther King Jr. Day to remember him and honor him and give him thanks for what he did for our community. Thank you.
Celebrating MLK Day, Martin Luther King Day, is a great importance in the world, I feel. And to me personally, not just because it's his birthday, celebrated on the third Monday of January, it celebrates somebody that actually took a step and a stand to legalize things for us, Black people and people of discrimination, showing that we're all the same and no one is different. It helps us academically, socially, and in the future, and for people to understand that, especially in the situations that are going on now, is very important. And that's what it means to me.
Martin Luther King Day means a lot. His dream was universal, so everybody from everywhere wants to fight for what he wants to fight for. And his message embodied so much. His spirit, his strength, and that's still progress we chose to do today. And it means so much because in the world, there's always going to be good and there's always going to be bad. And he chose to embody the good, which is really helpful because we see a lot of violence today against people, like everybody.
Hi, my name is Jasmine, and celebrating MLK means a lot to me. It means a lot to me because it's honoring the legacy and life of a man who was fighting for hope and equality in America. It also was showing that, if you used your voice, it was not likely to be drowned out as if you were using violence. And it's showing the next generations to come to stand up for their rights in nonviolent manners.
Hello, I'm Senator Joe Manchin. As the bells ring out in remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., let us continue to pray for peace, safety, and a greater understanding of one another. Dr. King once said, "The beauty of genuine brotherhood and peace is more precious than diamonds or silver or gold." The Mountain State and this great nation are home to countless leaders who, in the spirit of Dr. King, are inspiring others and making substantial contributions to their communities and our entire nation to strive for something positive amid the challenges that we all face. As always, I appreciate all of our community leaders who strive to make a difference for the greater good every single day. Thank you, and may God bless each and every one of you.
Must be a war on black men. Always has been. Love the culture we bring, but throw the other two fists in the trash bin. Over brass skin, but we here though. Can't tell cause I'm so high that I'm feeling real low. So much going on the inside and nobody cares to know. They don't understand what you came from, just criticize where you at. But never let it steal your pride, but to live, not die, get your mind off that. Just the plight of a black man, in a cold world that won't listen. Trying to find a place where I stand, dodging all the traps set against it. Just the plight of a black man that no one gives a damn about. They keep shooting with our hands up, claim victim when we stand up. Every day, catch up from every angle, Smith campaign on all of your screens. No matter what happened, it's our fault it happened. They leaving us dead in the street as we bleed. Build systems against us, destroyed our defenses, and left us to rot in the name that we free. Then flood us with poison and fund our abortions. If you survive that, then they kill off your dreams. And then it's self-hate. Look around and all you see is the struggle. Your brothers killing brothers over blocks. And the rock got the fiends in the huddle. The damage that does to your psyche is the reason someone killed for some Nikes. Try to prove y'all niggas nothing like me.
Nigga, please, you're all just alike, see?
See what I mean? Can't tell cause I'm so high that I'm feeling real low. So much going on the inside and nobody cares to know. They don't understand what you came from, just criticize where you at. But never let it steal your pride, fight to live, not die, get your mind off that. Just the plight of a black man, in a cold world that won't listen. Trying to find a place where I stand, dodging all the traps set against it. Just the plight of a black man, that no one gives a damn about. They keep shooting with our hands up, claim victim when we stand up. In the days when we fought to be self-sufficient, they attack from within to the world of mission. Stole our programs, turn them into weapons. Now they plan a parenthood or government assistance. Tell us I care, so vote for me. Then they get elected, it's the same story. Our mothers feel the worst when we leave home. We be scared too, but tell them don't worry, just to survive, just to live. And provide for the ones that we love. Try to do right just to get right. But no matter what we do to see a thug, some didn't get to choose a different life. All they know is to sell or use drugs. Some make it out to see a different light, just to have it blown out by a slug. No love.
On June 5th, 1963, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave a sermon entitled "A Knock at Midnight." It was a sermon that he had preached based on the Lucan parable that Jesus tells of the man who goes knocking on a friend's door in search of bread. The parable is a prayer about our persistence and perseverance in prayer. But Dr. King uses this to remind us that even in the darkest of times, there are our neighbors who search for bread, the bread of hope and the bread of peace and the bread of truth, the bread of justice, the bread of love. And he reminds the church of its role in the world, particularly in such darkened times, particularly the church in its role of seeking to offer bread to the world. So in this sermon, Dr. King says this: the church must be reminded that it is not the master nor the servant of the state, but rather the church is the conscience of the state. It must be the guide and the critic of the state, and never its tool. If the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal, it will become an irrelevant social club without any moral, spiritual authority. If the church does not participate actively in the struggle for peace and for economic and racial justice, it will forfeit the loyalty of millions and cause men everywhere to say that it has atrophied its will. But if the church will free itself from the shackles of the deadening status quo and, recovering its great historic mission, will speak and act fearlessly and intensely in the terms of justice and peace, it will enkindle the imagination of humankind and fire the souls of men, imbuing them with a glowing and ardent love for truth, for justice, and for peace. Men far and near will know the church as a great fellowship of love that provides light and bread for lonely travelers at midnight.
Ron Scott Jr. I'm the Cultural Diversity and Community Outreach Director for the Wheeling YWCA, and I wanted to kind of share a few thoughts about Dr. King during our celebration here today. One of the things I wanted to talk about was I think there should be a distinction between the Dr. King that gets portrayed, that gets presented to a lot of folks, and the Dr. King that existed, because we have a tendency to lean towards the idea of the we have a tendency to lean towards the version of Dr. King that was so peaceful, turning the other cheek, and we have a tendency to not focus on some of the direct missions that he had. And one of the things that I always think about were his ability to understand the goodness and innate nature of people. And that was one of the reasons that he took some of the approaches that he did. Like, he wanted to make sure that people saw the brutality that was put upon black people, because he thought that if people saw it, the innate goodness in them would feel. And some of us look back at that and it seems so naive, like why would he think that something like that would work? But then you fast forward to today and you realize that's exactly the kind of thing that happened with the George Floyd murder. People saw that and they couldn't turn away. They had to look at it. Just like they saw those water hoses being sprayed and people getting beaten on bridges, and the humanity of the average human being got exposed, and we began to feel for each other, because we are one huge community of the human race, and there are times when we can feel for our brother in a real way. Dr. King depended on that, and it was there. Just like with the movement that happened with the George Floyd murder, it brought out a humanity in all of us that made a connection. And I think those things are things that he doesn't get as much credit for, because he understood the psyche of the average American person and knew how to use that to the benefit of all of us. And I also wanted to make sure that he got credit for his approach. And I'm not talking about his approach when it comes to marching or the speeches that he gave or his nonviolent angle that he took. I want to talk about how he focused on things like legislature and policies. Because right now, I think we have a tendency to get caught up in how people treat us, how they feel about us, whether they like us, whether they're comfortable with us. And that was not what Dr. King's focus was. It was about changing policies, writing legislature to make sure we were at the tables, to make sure we were sitting in the seats, to make sure that legally we were allowed to be present and always counted. And those things are completely different than making sure someone likes me or someone feels comfortable around me. He wanted to make sure that the changes that he put in this country and in society were lasting and substantial. And you can only do that when you strike at the foot of policy, law, and all the legalities. And those two approaches were things that I don't think Dr. King gets enough credit for, and I wanted to make sure that I brought them up today. Thank you guys for all being a part of this celebration. I hope you have a great and wonderful evening.
Hi, I'm Glenn Elliott, Mayor of the City of Wheeling, and let me say just a few words today in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. It is difficult to say anything of a man about whom everything has been said. But in this year, in this most challenging of years, we need to look to his words, his life, and his legacy for guidance. King was just 34 years old when he challenged the nation to live up to his ideal of being a society where everyone is judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. By the sheer force of his will, he pushed the nation ever closer to its founding words that all men are created equal. But as 2020 reminds us, we are not there yet. And if anything, there are some strains of our current political discourse that want to pull us in the other direction. If Dr. King were alive today, I think he would marvel at how so many racial barriers in politics, in culture, and in entertainment have been shattered by those standing on his shoulders. But I think he would find much that is all too familiar, not only in terms of racial injustice, but also in economic inequality. In his time, he spoke of the fierce urgency of now. In our time, we owe it to our posterity to not give up the pursuit of his dream. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon or evening or morning or night or whatever time of the day it is that you're sharing with us. I'm Reverend Marcy Allen. I'm the assistant pastor at Mount Zion Baptist Church, and we're located in Philadelphia, West Virginia. And I'm here today just to share some reflections of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I have the privilege of being able to be a part of some of the civil rights movements during his time. That tells you how old I am. And I just thank God that I was able to witness some of the things that he did to remind me of just how great God is in all of our lives. When I was in high school, Martin Luther King formed a lot of the marches and the protests, and of course his protests were good protests. They didn't create problems. And one of the things that I remember that helped me out with everything that he did for all people, it wasn't just the African American people, it was for all people. So that when I graduated from high school and they were trying to make sure that equal opportunities were out there for everyone to receive a job, I got a phone call from my pastor saying that the local NAACP had been on different phone calls and different meetings with the group that was concerned about what was happening in the United States. So some of the local people and some of the local businesses were looking for African Americans for jobs. And my pastor called and said, there's a job at Wheeling Pittsburgh Steel, and they're looking for an African American person. And would you like to take that job? I said, well, I'll go check it out. Well, they were looking for a private secretary. And I didn't take full secretarial training, but I was proud and happy to recommend a young lady that I graduated from high school with to get that job. And she got that job and she kept it until she retired. And not too long after that, about 6 months later, I got another phone call. And he said, well, they're looking for an African American person to work at Columbia Gas. And so I said, okay, I'll go check that out. Went and took the test and was so excited, and I didn't get the job. The most important part of that job was for a teller. And I scored high on the math test, but the other girl that got the job scored higher on the vocabulary test. Of course, she was an African American. And of course, our local NAACP and the Pastors Association were all upset saying that you called us, we yanked her from where she was at to come home because at the time I was living in another state for this job and she still doesn't have the job. And they said, well, the next job that comes along, we'll get it. And certainly the next job that came along wasn't in my town of Martins Ferry, Ohio, it was in Bel Air, Ohio. So I look back over my life as to what God has done for me through Martin Luther King Jr. He reached out to many, many people with love. And I see that now, during the time that we're living, there's still people that are reaching out with love. You know that song, What the World Needs Love is Love. True love, good love, sweet love, that's what the world needs. And one of the things that one of the quotes that Martin Luther King had, he says that I would rather learn how to love than to let hate destroy my life. And I thank God for reminding me of those things. You know, when we listen to people on the higher ups, no matter whether it's the president, the vice president, whoever it is, whether it's a bishop of a church or whoever it is, when we look at other people instead of looking at the one who created us in his image, we find ourselves sometimes being disappointed and we fall down. And what we're seeing now during this time, I just look at all the years that I have been able to live my life and how great my life has been because of those leaders that taught me to love others. That's what it's all about. If you can't love, you can't make it, because love takes care of everything. And what I know about Martin Luther King and the time that we're celebrating, that so many people, all different races, loved him so much that they all came together to celebrate his day. Martin Luther King's birthday. And we don't want to let any day die, a birthday or anybody's birthday. But as African Americans, we should thank God that we have people and role models that have allowed us to see that we can make it. Some people say we'll never make it. I don't believe that. My grandmother, who was biracial, taught us that we were no different from anybody else. We could do what everybody did. That nobody was any more beautiful than us. No one was any smarter than us. We were the smartest people. And she handed that down to her children. Her children handed that down to their children. And I handed that down to my children and my grandchildren. And I have a great-grandson. But it's all about love. If you don't love yourself, you can't do anything. So I just thank God that I was able to come and share with you about what has happened to me in my life. Young people, I want you to know that you can make it. Don't let anybody tell you that you're no good, because God made everything great and you can make it. Because as old as I am, I look back over my life and I don't see anything bad. Thank God I lived in a town where I didn't have to deal with a whole lot of racism. I had some. I couldn't swim with the white kids on every day of the week. I had to sit in the balcony at the local theater. But God taught me how to get along with others. So I just want to thank God for what he's done. I want to thank the committee for wanting us to share what we know about Martin Luther King. And I want the world to know that as long as you love, you can make it. I praise God.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Joshua Leaf from Temple Shalom here in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I'm honored to get to be part of the City of Wheeling's MLK celebration and remembrance today. When I think about MLK, I think about the idea of bringing people together, people of diverse backgrounds, towards common goals of making our community a better place, not only for some, but for all with whom we share this world. In the 2nd century of the Common Era, there was a debate, it is found in the Talmud, between one of the greatest sages of the era, Rabbi Akiva, who was asked by his students, what is the single most important line in all of the Torah? And Akiva said, well, that's easy. It's Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. You should love your neighbor as yourself. It's a great line. We all enjoy that line. It gives us a sense of inspiration. However, one of the sages of lesser renown, Shimon ben Azai, challenged Rabbi Akiva and said, no, I've got a better verse. And he cited Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. These are the generations of Adam. Adam was made in the image of God. And people thought, that's ridiculous. The begats? Really? The famous so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so? How could that be a better verse than love your neighbor as yourself? And the answer is rather interesting and apropos for our observations today as we remember the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. The trouble, you see, with love your neighbor as yourself is, what if you don't love yourself? What if you are a fundamentally unhappy person? Then you might feel perfectly comfortable treating others badly to try to make yourself feel better at their expense. On the other hand, Shimon ben Azai lobbied, it isn't about you. It's about how all of us are connected. If Adam was made in the image of God and we are all descendants from that original first family, even metaphorically speaking, then we're all part of one human family. We are more closely connected than we are separated. And at this time, in our nation and around the world, as we feel separated more poignantly and more painfully than ever before in recent memory, it is inspiring to think that we are all part of something larger than ourselves, even while we are apart from each other. As the Reverend Dr. King mused, we may have come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. That's exactly what Shimon ben Azai was teaching nearly 1,800 years ago. We are part of one community, and bettering the lives of our own friends and family will only succeed when we also strive with equal vigor to better the lives of our extended neighbors and even the stranger who dwells amongst us. Don't just love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as if they had that same spark of the divine in their soul that you believe is in yours. Love your neighbor as if they, like you, were made in the image of God. Then, and only then, will all of us merit the blessings we have already received. Let us strive from this day forth to do what we can to lift up the boats of all those who are sailing on the sea with us. Then maybe this day of remembrance will truly become a day of celebration when all of us are truly free at last. I wish everyone in our wider Wheeling community a very meaningful and inspiring day today as we treasure the legacy of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. But let it not be only today. Let this message carry us forward for all the days yet to come. Thank you all so much.
Good evening. Delegate Sean Fluharty here. I want to thank the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee for the invitation this evening. Even though it's virtual, it's an important invitation, and for the work that you do here in the community to bring about visibility for the life of Dr. King. It's especially important in this area. It's especially important in this year. I'll be remiss if I didn't bring up important movement going on in this country that happened this particular year. And that's the Black Lives Matter movement. It's an important movement, one that I believe will bring about real change in this country. It has been framed a certain way, portrayed a certain way on television, and it really goes back to history that we know about in this country. Dr. King faced similar criticism in his movement. And when I was asked about giving a brief intro this evening, I thought about a book that I have. It's a collection of Dr. King's work called All Labor Has Dignity that I have here in my office. And it's a collection of his work, especially during the labor movement and how it intertwined with the unions and workers' rights in this country. And I thought about one in particular. In 1959, Dr. King gave a speech in Atlanta, Georgia. And that speech was with the United Packing House Workers Union of America. And in his speech, he stated the following: "It is a dark day indeed when men cannot work to implement the ideal of brotherhood without being labeled communist." Now, what does that have to do with today? We've heard the buzzwords, from communism to socialism. Anything they can do to defeat the change that we're trying to make in this country. I'm happy to stand with you and fight for that change. And I'm thankful that we have you in the community to not just bring awareness and visibility to the life of Dr. King, but to fight at the ground level for real change, which I believe is coming. Thank you for allowing me to have a few moments with you this evening, and thank you for all you do in the community. Delegate.
Many people don't realize that the Martin Luther King birthday celebration for the state of West Virginia started in Wheeling. But let me give you a little bit of history behind the celebration. The actual birthday was recognized by Congress in 1983. But the birthday as a holiday didn't come into being until 1986. But in Wheeling, West Virginia, we began to celebrate the Martin Luther King holiday in 1985, January 1985. Let me give you a little bit of history about how this came about. In 1983, August 1983, 2 busloads of people from Wheeling went to DC to commemorate the March on Washington. Some of the notable people on the trip was myself, Reverend Charles Elwood, and also Reverend Reverend Dr. Bowden. And that day, nearly 750,000 people, they say, were at the march in D.C. But on the way back from the trip, myself and Reverend Elliott and some of the other people got together and said, let's do something and continue this goodwill. So during 1984, we all got together and started planning to have a celebration in 1985 to commemorate Dr. King's birthday. So, and we came up, the place we decided to have the celebration was here at 4th Street United Methodist Church. And the reason we thought it was strategic to have the celebration here was because 4th Street United Methodist Church was a sister church of Simpson United Methodist, the African American church. So we have an African American church and a white church having one pastor. So we had the celebration here. And me as a chairperson, I had the opportunity to meet with many, many other clergy people. It was an interfaith service that we had here. The actual holiday, we had a 2-day celebration. On Saturday, we had a concert, musical concert that was held at Wayman A&E Church, AME Church. How the choir was put together was all in one day. It was a community choir. A musician by the name of Ethel Kathy Austin would come from Charleston and have people come in on Saturday morning and create a choir. And then we would have a concert that night at Wayman AME Church. And then the same choir would be the service choir. But let me tell you about the service. It was really a grand type interfaith service. Approximately 300 people showed up at that first interfaith service in 1985. Would start off with about, I believe, seemed to be probably 15 to 20 clergy people marching in, singing "We're Coming to Zion" with their robes and their banners. And that would start the service. But our first person we had as our speaker was a gentleman by the name of Reverend Dr. Carol Felton out of New York. And I do not quite remember his message, but I believe he was also a King associate. And the first award winner was Doc White, a well-known pharmacist in Wheeling. But some of the notable people who were on the committee at the time, the Martin Luther King committee, was Leroy Clement, who's the NAACP president, Reverend Dr. Robert Bowden, who's actually a King associate, and he gave us the wherewithal to contact other people, because Dr. Bowden actually marched with Dr. King. And that following year for the service, we had Wyatt T. Walker. If you look on the films, you'll see Wyatt T. Walker right next to Dr. King. And we had some more notable people, like Reverend Tom Keeley of the First United Methodist Church, I believe, was also on the committee. He was the co-chair with me. But we continued this celebration for many years in the community before we moved out to Wheeling Jesuit. But some of the more notable speakers we had was a gentleman by the name of also Pressy Nesbitt, who was a freedom fighter against apartheid, who spoke at St. Joe's Cathedral over the years, which was, he just mesmerized the crowds. But we had this is the 35th year, or 36th year, be the 36th year of this celebration. And it's going strong still. We're at Wheeling Jesuit University, not Wheeling College now, it's changed there, and it's been there for the past probably 15 years, if I recall. But the celebration actually started here at this church, 4th Street United Methodist, in 1985.
I'm here to present this Martin Luther King Award to Daniel L. Dudley. But before I present this award to him, let me tell you a little bit about Daniel Dudley. Daniel Dudley has been a friend of mine for many years. But the thing I describe Daniel Dudley as being a man of integrity, character, humility, and humbleness. Let me tell you some personal things that he has done for me. During the time that my wife was ill, those many days, most people know the story, my story. Brother Dudley would bring me a meal every Sunday, making sure I had a Sunday meal, and it continued for many, many weeks. And him and his wife always seemed to be looking out for me and other people in the community. It wasn't just me that he was always helping, he was helping other people. Just as recently as this past Halloween, him and his wife made bags of candy and delivered the candies to the kids in the neighborhood. These are the charitable things that Brother Dudley has done for his community. He also puts on a picnic for his community every other year in the community. As you will know, Brother Dudley is also on the city council, and people, they appointed Brother Dudley because his community has faith in him, and they know him as a man of integrity and character. So at this time, I want to read Brother Dudley's biography. Brother Daniel Dudley, I keep calling Brother Dudley because that's what I call him all the time. Daniel Dudley was married to Pamela Page, father of 2 children, Amanda in Wellsburg, and Daniel, wife Siobhan, California, and 2 grandchildren, a lifelong resident of Wellsburg, West Virginia, graduate of Brooke High School, employed by Eagle Can Manufacturing, Wellsburg for 43 years. Before retiring in 2015, he served as a union rep and a volunteer on the Eagle Manufacturing Union Civil Rights Committee. Current president of Eagle's Employees Federal Credit Union for 10 years. Vice president of the Weirton-Wellsburg chapter of the credit union. Currently serving on the Wellsburg City Council representing the First Ward for the past 2.5 years. Lifetime member of Henderson Chapel AME Church, past member of the year, continues to provide pro bono lawn care service for church members of the Wheeling branch of the NAACP. Upon returning from original Million Man's March in Washington, D.C., he shared the experience with Wellsburg Middle School students in a question and answer assembly. Chairman of the First Ward Playground Reunion 2017 and 2019. The playground is named after Eliza Nichols, the first African-American councilman in Wellsburg. He has volunteered and coached youth soccer, t-ball, and girls middle school basketball. Also coached girls basketball for Ohio County Special Olympics. If there is one person who is really deserving of this award, it's Daniel Dudley. He's one of these unsung heroes that's trying to save the world, not the whole world at one time, but person by person, and his works reflect that. And it's my honor today to present this award, the Martin Luther King Award, presented to Daniel L. Dudley, in appreciation for his many contributions to the community, January 2021.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say that I would also like to share this award with First Ward. It's so many people that made an impact in my life. You know, my parents raised me, and they taught me to listen to people, be respectful to people, and that's where it all starts. It starts in the home. I had an upbringing where we had to go to church and everything. We had people, we lived in a very diverse neighborhood, and not only did we have black councilmen that cared and everything, we also had another councilman, his name was Ed Stein, and he worked with a lot of people, and they did things, and when we didn't understand things that were going on with other playgrounds and things like that, they were receiving things, he worked, him and E.R. Nichols they worked together and they would build benches and see that we had things at our playground. And in Ed Stein's honor, we also had Ed Stein's Way. When you come down the Yankee Trail, it's a walking trail, but the people like E.R. Nichols, the Taylors, the Royals, and all these people, and Nicholses, they've inspired me all my life. And so this honor is not only for me, but it's for myself, and it's for the First Ward Playground, and I appreciate it. Thank you. My brother used to always, my one brother always used to.
Good afternoon. This is Reverend Daniel Mason from Mount Zion Baptist Church of Philadelphia, West Virginia, and I come today to share with you on this occasion where we are getting ready to start to celebrate again the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King. As we all know, that King was a great civil rights leader who made a difference and an impact in our communities on justice and equality and love and peace, which is what we still need today. My heart goes out to a lot of different areas because I remember Dr. King as a child. I didn't really get to know about him until after he was dead. It was an uprise in the communities. I didn't understand why it was causing such a ruckus. And one night, as me and my family sat across the street from our house, watching a house burn behind our house, hoping and praying that it would not catch our house on fire. And I was sitting there, my grandfather was there, and I was asking him, Grandpa, why are these things happening? And he began to tell me the story of Dr. Martin Luther King. He began to expound on the differences that we had amongst races and amongst religions, which I thought we were all one, that we were all the same. Then I began to realize that things were different in the world. And when I learned why Dr. King's life was taken, because he wanted to make a difference in our nation. Sadly, his causes were rejected, and he died for the good causes. I just want to reflect on a quote of Dr. King's, and it says, "We need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice. Not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity." Humanity, the human race. Equality for all. Money seems to corrupt. It seems to pass judgment. It seems to destroy. And we are in a time where money is define our lives. Some people have a lot of it, and a lot of people don't have any at all. But in equality, we all deserve the same things, the same rights. We all deserve to be loved. We all deserve to have things in our life, such as food, shelter, jobs. But it seems there's been a breakdown and people are drifting away. We need to go back to the dream of Dr. King. Reflect on the dream. Reflect on the words that he spoke, that all men shall be created equal. Whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Protestant, but we're all created by the same God. And oh, what a difference we could make if we relit the flames of his purpose and his cause. Today, we celebrate his birthday, but we cannot deny that there are things that are still going on that we are still dealing with. There's still hatred. There's still prejudice. Why? Why can't we just go back to being who God created us to be? We just celebrated Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ. And God said that he gave his son that we might have life and have it more abundantly. He didn't say some of us, but he meant all of us. Jesus came to promote the peace of his Father. So this year, as we go into the year 2021, let us relight our flames. Let us stand up and let us fight for the right. Let us denounce those things that come against us. Let us show love to those who hate, because love is what conquers hate. The Spirit of God that dwells among us, if we accept him as King, promoted him, peace. We pray that as we go through this next year and our pandemic comes to a close, as we reunite in our communities, as jobs are regained, as people are regaining their homes and regaining jobs, it's all because if we work together as one, that we can make it. Let us reflect. Let us remember that that dream, that vision was for us all. Today, I am here with Miss Ellen Saunders, and she was the nominee for the Rosa Park Award for 2021. Ellen has been married 52 years to Eugene L. Saunders Sr., councilman and former mayor of the city of Moundsville, West Virginia. Mother of 4 children, grandchildren of 10, and great-grandmother of 6. She's a lifelong member of Wayman AME Church, currently president of the Women's Missionary Society currently, Laughlin Memorial Chapel 2009 present administration assistant, past education mentor at Chapel 2009 to 2011, Ellen as president of Missionary Society asked members to collaborate with the Blossoms program to provide resources for the homeless ladies for a Saturday, which includes members serving, assisting, and interacting with the ladies' community service. Ellen, on behalf of the Martin Luther King Birthday Celebration Committee, I would like to present to you the Rosa Parks Award. For the year 2021.
I would just like to thank the committee, and this was a wonderful surprise, but I think that's my mission, to help people, and especially children, because I love working with children. And I thank the committee and everyone involved.
Today again I am here with Miss Judy Saunders, our second nomination for the Rosa Parks Award. Married for 47 years to George Saunders, mother of 1 and 2 grandchildren. She is a lifelong member of Wayman AME Church of Wheeling, West Virginia. She currently is the financial secretary for Wayman AME Church, has held this position for approximately 20 years. Currently employed at the Laughlin Memorial Chapel, an after-school program as the program coordinator. Judy started at the chapel in 2011 as the 3rd and 4th grade mentor. Laughlin Memorial Chapel has been a beacon in the East Wheeling community, serving children since 1970 as an after-school program. The after-school program assists children with homework, provides field trips, meals, and helping them achieve their dreams. The children are exposed to many different experiences to expand their knowledge of their community. Judy's mission is to encourage children to identify goals and do all that she can to help them reach to the finish line. Judy, on behalf of the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee, I would like to present to you this Rosa Parks Award for the year 2021.
Thank you. It certainly is an honor to receive such a prestigious award, and I, in my heart, think people see you different than how you see yourself. So I'm really thankful for this award, and I thank the nominating committee and for all those who work and love justice for all people. Thank you very much.
Okay.